Let's talk about the evolution of emergency management as a discipline and the evolution of the approach on how to manage events of high impact in the United States. The first point of discussion is that emergency management shall be comprehensive, which means that emergency managers must account for all hazards, phases, stakeholders, and impacts relevant to disaster. Depending on where you sit around the emergency management table, different things are going to matter to you. For some people, it's the money and economic impact. For some, it's the lives lost. For others, it's the ecological impact. Overall, consequences to adverse events come in different forms, and emergency management personnel must consider all these things and more. So, what exactly is emergency management? It is a discipline that deals with risk and the ways to minimize that risk. It also deals with the ways we look at different risks that surround us and how we organize our response to each of them. Which ones are high priority and which are low? After we assess that information, we can structure a policy to address the risks that are most likely to happen and the risks that might have the largest consequences. You might have a risk that's very unlikely, but if it were to occur, the consequences could be overwhelming. Emergency management aims to minimize the impacts of adverse events on life and property. Picture a community and the lifelines of that community. What does it take to support it? What does it take to interrupt it? If you suddenly get up and have no school to go to, no business to work at, no roads to take, then there are certain structures or lifelines that have been disrupted. Emergency management must observe community risks and prepare to minimize those risks so that when adverse events occur, that community can have the least disruption possible. Emergency management does not happen only in the response phase. Emergency management personnel work every day because those blue sky moments are the most opportune times for forming a game plan. Many of you may associate FEMA and the Department of Homeland Security with post-disaster grants and governmental functions during emergencies. However, their presence has not always been the norm. For example, this picture shows the World Trade Center bombing of 1993, not to be confused with the events of 9/11. A lot more injuries were sustained in this incident because of flawed evacuations, rather than in the blast itself. As you can see in this photo, there's a crowd of responders with no direction. This is an emergency response without management, which gives us some perspective on why emergency preparedness is so crucial. When discussing concepts from this field, it's important to understand terms that are frequently used. Emergencies are routine adverse events that can be handled with the resources of a single agency, plus some additional assistance if needed. Emergencies are impending, so the term emergency refers to the imminence of an event, rather than the severity of consequences. A hazard is something that can harm us. This source of danger, if it meets the right conditions, can develop into something very risky and harmful to life, property, and so on. A threat is similar. However, a threat is intentionally activated by a human, such as the acts of the World Trade Center bombing. A disaster is different. Disasters happen when an emergency overpowers the ability of the local community, agency, or authorities. This can lead to more issues, such as delays in assistance and logistical problems. Even worse than this is a catastrophe. A catastrophe is a disaster on steroids. It's an event that has extended past the capability of local, regional, and state entities and has reached the national level. Although they sound similar in nature, these are common terms that you will hear frequently when in the field. It's important to know the difference. We now understand that emergency management is about assessing and minimizing risks. We explored the roles and responsibilities that government and support organizations have when things go wrong, and we've discussed some of the basic terminology that emergency preparedness professionals use. All of this will lay the foundation for the remainder of the course.